Hello, Jacksonites, and welcome to a new movie review. And I hope you all have had a Merry Christmas and a Happy Holidays. So, I'm going to celebrate the occasion in my own way. And how am I going to celebrate the holidays, you may ask? By reviewing one of the most infamous horror movies in existence. And also, pardon my hair, I went through a giant blow dryer and came out an entirely different man. That makes no sense, but moving on. um, so today is, yes, indeed, December 26th. And a certain movie came out on December 26th, 45 years ago. It's one of the most infamous horror movies ever made. And it's one of the most infamous movies to have a cursed production ever made. Today, I will be reviewing the 1973 supernatural almost masterpiece, The Exorcist. Yes, indeed. Why review The Exorcist, especially now? Well, as I said, today is the 40th anniversary of the film, December 26, 1973, excuse me. 1993 was Jurassic Park. December 26, 1973, The Exorcist was released in theaters, and it was a gargantuan success. With a $12 million budget, making $441 million in its box office run, which for 1973, that was a butt-fuck ton of money. So that's part of the reason. Today's the 40th anniversary. And also, since I rewatched the film not so long ago, I finally decided, you know what? I need to put my opinion out, or not that I need to, I want to put my opinion out on this movie because I've never actually given my full opinion on The Exorcist. I've somewhat alluded to it in past videos, specifically stating a couple times that The Exorcist is one of few examples of a horror film that with a slow pacing that I think works. And by the way, yes, I am wearing a Spider-Man Venom shirt that was given to me by a very special somebody. And she refuses to be on camera, even though her foot is in the shot.
Really? No.
Would you just get on screen?
No.
You're such a wimp.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, that's why I'm reviewing The Exorcist. And for any of those who are looking forward to the next Tremors video, that'll be next. I just really wanted to do this. And also, I wanted to do this on the 45th anniversary because what other movie am I going to review that's going to celebrate its 45th anniversary? Never. That's when. So, The Exorcist is a very, 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 very interesting movie for a few reasons. It's one of few R-rated movies that I know of to receive multiple Academy Awards, as well as nominations, but specifically awards that it actually won. Let's see. The film was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Picture, Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, Best Supporting Actress, Best Director, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, Best Production Design, and Best Sound Mixing. And it was the first horror film to be nominated for Best Picture. And at the 46th Annual Academy Awards ceremony, the film won 2 statuettes highlighted in bold, that being Adapted Screenplay and Best Sound Mixing. It was also nominated for 7 Golden Globes in 1974. And at the 31st Golden Globe ceremony, the film won 4 awards. The Golden Globe for Best Motion Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actress, and Best Screenplay. But it was nominated as well for a Golden Globe for Best Actress, Best Supporting Actor, and New Star of the Year. It was also selected for preservation at the Library of Congress in 2010, and it was placed number 3 on American Film Institute's top 100 thrills, and as well as top 100 heroes and villains. Reagan McNeil at number 9 villain. So this film certainly does have a legacy, and it certainly did have a lot of hype surrounding it for a couple of reasons. One, it was adapted from a book, of course, written by William Peter Blatty, who also wrote the screenplay for the film. And the book specifically, I myself have not read the book, though it is based on a real-life exorcism case around the case of Roland Doe, which I'm pretty sure is a pseudonym or just an anonymous name. But Roland Doe was a 14-year-old boy who was an alleged victim of a demonic possession. And the exorcism itself that was committed on him, or not committed, but executed on him, was done in 1949. And let's see, and the novel The Exorcist came out in 1971. The Exorcist itself was directed by William Friedkin and stars Ellen Burstyn, Linda Blair, Max von Sydow, and Jason Miller as the main 4 characters. And of course, this is part of the Exorcist franchise, and if you ask me, this movie did not, I repeat, did not need a franchise. This movie should have been a completely standalone film. If you wanted to make a prequel, that would have been okay. Just do a better job. Not like Dominion or Exorcist: The Beginning. I've heard those movies are bad. So it's famous and infamous for that. But The Exorcist, as I said at the beginning, is infamous because it's one of the most infamous films to have a cursed production. Now, I don't know of every single incident that occurred on set making The Exorcist. I do know of some things. The original shooting schedule, I believe, was around 85 to 90 days to make the film. And for a movie on a $12 million budget back in 1973, 85 to 90 days was quite a while. But because of all the problems that was experienced on set, and as well as William Friedkin apparently being one of those directors that was a massive pain in the ass to deal with, the shooting schedule ended up being extended to 224 days. Your long hair has cursed this review. So what about my long hair, huh, boy? There's a certain somebody who likes my long hair and does not want me to cut it. So I'm totally going to do it Mulan style. Just like your hair. Yep. Zip. Anyway, so 224 days was the amount of time that was spent just shooting this movie. And it was also extended to that because of a lot of the film's, as Eric Harrison put it in his review, bad coincidences that happened. Doing demonic movies is definitely something that I am curious about, but most likely will never do if I ever do get into the film business. Another movie that had a really cursed production was the original Omen from 1976. Funny, the 70s really liked their demonic movies, didn't they? The Omen itself had a very, very, very cursed production, and it had a ominous feel to it throughout. Now, some examples of the stuff that went on during the production of The Exorcist. Let's see. The toddler son of one of the main actors was hit by a motorbike and hospitalized. People close to cast and crew members on set died under mysterious reasons throughout the film. Like one example, let's see, what's this guy's name? That might be him. Yeah, Burke Dennings, who was a director character in the movie, played by Jack McGrowan. He passed away right after he shot all of his scenes during the film. And he's not a huge character in the movie, but he did pass away under mysterious circumstances right after he finished all of his scenes for The Exorcist. The son of the voice of Pazuzu in this film, let's see, what was her name? Mercedes McCambridge. Her son actually ended up killing his girlfriend as well as committing suicide not long after the film came out. And on set, there was a fire that broke out and destroyed a good majority of the movie set, but did not touch Reagan's room, the main character's room. It was not even touched. And the biggest supposed thing that happened on set is one of the extras in the film turned out to be a serial killer who confessed to the bag murders throughout the late 70s, either in the 80s or the 90s. I'm not sure how much of this I do actually think is cursed, or if it is, as Eric Harrison put it, as just bad coincidences. But maybe if you're making something like this that deals with demonic possessions and anti-Christianity stuff like this, you might want to kind of be on your guard. You may end up bringing some bad luck upon yourself when dealing with this kind of shit. And as one of the producers on The Exorcist famously said after this movie was completed, evil resides within the celluloid of this film. So again, I'm not sure how much of this I believe, but it does kind of make me wonder, well, did they open up something, or did they stir up a hornet's nest when making this movie? Who knows? So the actual plot of the original Exorcist is actually somewhat simple. Lancaster Marin, who is a veteran Catholic priest who performed an exorcism in the 1950s, goddamn my nose edges, is on an archaeological dig in the ancient city of Hatra in Iraq. Hatra being an ancient city in the Ninawa governorate of present-day Iraq. The city lies 290 kilometers northwest of Baghdad and 110 kilometers southwest of Mosul. There he finds an amulet that resembles a statue of Pazuzu, a demon of ancient origins with whose history Father Marin is very familiar with. If I ever talk about Dominion and Exorcist the Beginning, I'll get into that more. In Georgetown, actress Chris McNeil is living on location with her 12-year-old daughter Reagan. She is starring in a film about student activism directed by her friend and associate Burke Dennings. After messing around with an Ouija board, stupidly, always stupidly, and contacting a supposedly imaginary friend whom Reagan calls Captain Howdy, Reagan begins to act very strangely throughout the coming weeks, including making mysterious sounds, stealing, exhibiting abnormal strength, and constantly using obscene language. Chris hosts a party during which Reagan comes downstairs unannounced, tells one of the guests, who's an astronaut, that he will die in space, and then pisses herself all over the floor. Later, Reagan's bed begins to shake violently when she's trying to go to sleep, which adds further to her mother's horror. Chris consults a number of physicians. However, her doctor, Dr. Klein, and his associates find nothing physiologically wrong with her daughter, despite Reagan undergoing a massive battery of diagnostic tests. One night when Chris is out, Burke Dennings is babysitting a heavily sedated Reagan, and Chris returns to hear that he has died from falling out of a window breaking his neck by twisting his neck a full 180 degrees. Okay. Although this is assumed to have been an accident given Burke's history of heavy drinking, his death is investigated by Lieutenant William Kinderman, played by Lee J. Cobb. Kinderman interviews Chris, and he also consults psychiatrist Father Damien Karras, played by Jason Miller, who is recently shaken to his core after the death of his frail mother. The doctors, whom think that Reagan's aberration are mostly psychiatric in origin, recommend an exorcism be performed. Chris arranges a meeting with Father Karras, and after Reagan speaks backwards in different language, in different voices, and exhibits scars in the form of the words "help me" on her stomach, Karras is convinced that Reagan is indeed possessed by some demon. Believing her soul is in danger, he decides to perform an exorcism himself. The experienced Father Marin is selected for performing the actual exorcism, with Karras assisting, which is an actual highly recommended, not really rule, but tradition. When performing an exorcist, it is highly advised against doing an exorcism alone. You need to have at least 1 or 2 people present to either help you out or just be there as witnesses. Both priests witness Reagan perform a series of bizarre, vulgar acts, including spitting out pea soup, spitting out a massive loogie of chicken noodle soup, growing a starfire purple tongue and flicking it out like a lizard, floating in the air like a crucifix, and growling and voicing in different voices and sounding like a fucking beast. They attempt to exorcise this demon. However, it stubbornly decides to stay, and it toys with them, specifically Father Karras, and he shows weakness and is dismissed by Marin, who stupidly attempts the exorcism alone. Karras enters the room later and discovers Marin has died of a heart attack. After failing to revive Father Marin, the enraged Father Karras confronts the mocking, laughing spirit and wrestles Reagan's body to the ground. And at Karras' invitation, it leaves Reagan's body and possesses Karras. In a moment of self-sacrifice, the priest throws himself out the window before being compelled to harm Reagan. He is mortally injured in the process, and Father Dyer, who is an old friend of Father Karras, happens upon the scene and administers the last rites to his friend as he passes away, assumingly. A few days later, Reagan, who is now back to her normal self and her wounds are indeed healing, prepares to leave for Los Angeles with her mother. And although Reagan has no apparent recollection of her possession, she is moved by the sight of Dyer's clerical collar and to kiss him on the cheek. Kinderman, who narrowly misses their departure, befriends Father Dyer as he investigates Father Karras' death, thus ending the film somewhat abruptly, wouldn't you say? So, how about this plot? I can't say that it's especially deep. Really? I do make you worse, don't I? Child. Yeah, you want me to.
Ew.
But anyway, so I can't say that this plot is especially deep and is especially groundbreaking. I can't say this is one of the greatest stories that I've ever heard, but, and yes, I am eating Skittles, as the archetype for the typical possession movie out there, you can't get as classic as this. Now, of course, there are many Exorcist ripoff films out there. Probably the most famous being the Manitou. As far as possession plots get, this is as basic as it gets. Well, not really basic, but it's as classic as it gets. But because it's the archetype of that kind of plot, at least in my opinion, it is. Why are you laughing? Here, because it's the archetype, it's not really a problem. Now, hang on, let me finish these. Damn it. I can't chew and talk at the same time. Stop laughing. Really? If I pass out on stream, I'm not going to be happy. Hey, down in the comments, should I pour all this all over her?
That's what she said.
You're blocked by the fan. It don't even matter.
Good.
That's my girlfriend, ladies and gents.
No. Get out of here.
Okay, I'm out of here. Anyway, so my personal history with The Exorcist. I first heard about the film through the first season of Cinemassacre's Monster Madness. Though then again, I'm pretty sure I did hear of the movie The Exorcist beforehand. I just didn't specifically know what it was about until I saw Monster Madness Season 1. And I was always curious about it. But for some reason, I never truly had the desire to watch it until about 2 years ago. I have only seen this movie twice. My first initial viewing when I was 19, and my second viewing, what was it, 2 weeks ago? About 2 weeks ago. But beforehand, I'd always heard about it, like I said, and I was always curious about it. And I truly wasn't compelled to see it until I watched a video. I think it was the top 10 most cursed productions in cinema history. And of course, The Exorcist was on that list. So that got me really curious. And I decided when I was at my local FYE, I finally decided, you know what? I'm going to buy The Exorcist. And this is the extended director's cut, mind you. And I got this for like $6. That's a steal, always, right? So I finally sat down and I watched it, and I wasn't disappointed. Do I consider this to be one of my all-time favorite horror films? No. Not exactly. Is it a good film? Yes, very much so. It's a great film. Do I think it's one of the greatest horror movies ever made? Yes and no. As far as it being a horror movie, does it succeed at being scary? Oh, yes. I can't say it's specifically one of the greatest horror movies of all time. Maybe certainly of the 1970s, that's for sure. But of all time, I don't really know about that. I'd have to really think about that. But anyway, back to topic. I don't consider this one of my favorite horror movies for mainly one reason. This isn't exactly my type of horror film. I do like the more extreme stuff. I do like the really dark, the really gory, which this movie isn't incredibly gory, but when there is gore, it is shocking. It is still of the slow burn family. Now, I will get to my pros and cons in just a moment. But because this is of the slow burn family, I can't exactly say that this is one of my favorite horror films. If I was to make a runner-up list, however, I would put it on that list. I do enjoy The Exorcist. I think it is a fine film. Very enjoyable. Very well made. Oh, thanks, KPF. My 05 Skull Island review will be getting re-edited, which you and I need to watch. So anyway, that being said, let's get to my pros and cons of The Exorcist, shall we? Pro number 1 is Linda Blair as Regan McNeil. Wow. Just wow. Now, Jesus. Hang on to these for me. They're just going to distract me. Stop.
No.
You're making me laugh. First off, Linda Blair, I believe at the time. Well, actually, I can just do the math. She was born in 1959. So she was 14 years old at the time when she did The Exorcist. And it's apparently a fact that after the movie was released, for about 6 months after, I sense a new Nick Jackson compilation. Oh, no. No, 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 no.
Yes.
No.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
No. I like yelling at my goddamn computer.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so for up to 6 months after The Exorcist was released, Linda Blair actually had to have bodyguards present because there was a lot of religious zealots that were threatening to kill Linda Blair because they actually believed that this movie was a real thing. So that goes to show her acting talents as Regan. Linda Blair does an absolutely fantastic job as Regan McNeil. I will always give actors and actresses respect if they can play a character. They play two characters as one character. That makes any sense. Linda Blair is playing a little girl who is also possessed by a demon. And this is why I'll always give massive props to the actress who portrays Olivia Moore in iZombie, because she plays a character who's a zombie who goes through frequent personality shifts on a regular basis. Why the hell do I hear rattling around in here? Motherfucker. Damn it. Anyway, so I will always give actors and actresses a lot of respect if they can portray a wide variety of personality shifts in their character in the movie that they're in. And Linda Blair certainly does do a good job at that. She starts out as this humble, innocent, playful little girl who clearly has an excellent... Your girlfriend needs to watch my other compilation. She has, unfortunately. Then again, I was the one who introduced her to it.
I already watched it like 3 times.
Why?
It's fucking funny.
And no, I will not be reviewing the 18 movie long witchcraft series. Fuck you. Anyway, where was I? You made me lose track. Oh yeah. So she goes from this innocent little girl to this abhorrent, violent, mean-spirited, no pun intended, horrendous being that is just an utterly abysmal thing of existence, being the demon who possesses her. Now, granted, that's not her actual voice that's coming out of her mouth when she is possessed. That's Mercedes McCambridge, who did voice the demon, whom she does a good job too. But you don't really notice unless you obviously look into the film and discover that that wasn't her actual voice. I didn't know that that wasn't her actual voice the first time I saw this film. I thought the demon voice that comes out of Reagan's mouth, which is dubbed, of course, I thought that actually was Linda Blair's real voice. So, I mean, good for the effects crew for doing a good dub for once. Now, if only you could work on your Italian dubs. But point being is that Linda Blair does an absolutely phenomenal job. You feel so bad that this innocent little girl is being put through such a horrendous ordeal, being possessed by a demon who gets her face smashed in, her fingernails torn out, her hair torn out, nose broken. She doesn't eat, she doesn't drink, she doesn't go to the bathroom. And then this demon does some really horrible shit to this little girl. Probably the worst of all. Yeah, I'll save that for when I get to the scares. So, the cross scene. But overall, Linda Blair does an absolutely fantastic job as Reagan. And she certainly did deserve that nomination for Best Supporting Actress, if only she did win it. Pro number 2 is that this movie's pacing. As I said a minute ago, this movie is part of the slow burn family. I've said it many times. Damn, I burned my hand. I've said it many times. I don't like slow burn horror movies. I find slow burns to be boring. I like my horror movies with a quicker pace. If you want to have them with If you want to have them with a cinematic pace, that's fine, because then I don't notice. I don't notice the slow pace because it's slow when it needs to be and it's quick when it needs to be. You know what? She's just like lewd sexual reference this, sexual reference that. I think I found the one. Anyway, but when a horror movie is intentionally keeping an overall slow pace, I do find the film to be incredibly tedious and incredibly boring. The original Halloween, for example, which I still stand by my decision to give it a 0 out of 10. Fuck the original Halloween. Halloween 2018, on the other hand, fantastic. But with The Exorcist, it's one of very few examples of a horror movie that has a good slow pace. It's not incredulously continental drift slow. The pace here is slow. It ranges from slow to Jaws speed, if that makes any sense, as I like to call it. Jaws has a slow pace that slowly builds and then goes down, builds and then goes down as the movie goes on. In which, in that case, that's another example of a horror movie that has a slower pace. And same case for the original Exorcist. The pacing for The Exorcist, it builds and then it slows. It builds and then it slows. And then it really builds and then it finally climaxes and goes kaboom. Can I see the pillow for a sec? The pillow. Stop it!
You said it, not me.
You're the one who's making it into a reference.
You just said climax. I can't not laugh.
Film climax. Oh my god. Child. Do I need to light a match? Because I just ripped one.
No.
I just said that to shut her up. Anyway, so the pacing with The Exorcist, the slow build and the slow pace does work because it draws you in. It gets you hooked. And then when you feel like it's getting a little too slow, all of a sudden something really bombastic and really unexpected happens. It shocks you, it leaves you thrilled, and then it goes back to being slow. This is what I mean when it builds and then it slows. It builds and then it slows. Every time it builds and right before it goes back down was when something shocking happens. And then finally the actual exorcism itself, which I do consider to be the film's climax, happens. It's thrilling, and then it goes kaboom, and then you feel all relieved once the movie is over. So is this my favorite example of a slow pacing that works? No, I'd probably have to give that to Jaws, and goddamn, that one little piece of hair just lets it stick out like a devil's horn. Well, I guess you could say my hair makes me look horny. But if I was to say there's a second best, I'd probably give it to The Exorcist. The Exorcist overall, its pacing, I wouldn't quite say that it's perfect, because as good as the exorcism scene is, well, I'll talk about that in just a minute, but overall the pacing is nearly perfect. Let's see. Pro number 3, the religious aspects about this film. Now, of course, KPF says climax, wink face.
Ew.
And then relieved after the climax.
Stop that shit. Ew. You're nasty.
You're not even on camera. Your ass is on camera. Not literally. Upsetty spaghetti?
Yes.
Yeah, Italian zombie movie.
Ew.
Anyway. What was I talking about? Oh, yeah, the religious aspects. Now, of course, this dealing with exorcism, of course, Catholicism is heavy in this film. Now, I do believe that Christianity, or like Christians and Christianity, does deal with exorcisms as well. But I'm pretty sure that the main religion that is seen in this film is Catholicism. I'm not going to give my opinions on religion in this video, but I'm just going to say I'm very glad that the religious aspects in this film, while they are certainly prevalent and they do have a good deal to do with the film's story, I'm glad that they're not just shoved down your throat, and it's not a forced become a Catholic or be a Roman Catholic convert message film. So glad that they did not do that with this movie. Catholicism and religion in general is used as a sign of hope and a potential tool to fight back against evil, and nothing more. It is no forced allegory. There's no forced social commentary about religion, and I'm so goddamn glad that this movie does not do that, because I don't think I'd like this movie nearly as much as I do if there was one. Pro number 4 is the suspense in this film is overall quite good. There's lots of long periods of silence, which leads me into another pro that I have with this film, being the lack of music, surprisingly. The music itself was done by what was the name of the guy? By Jack Nitschke. Pretty sure that looks like a German name. Jack Nitschke, who did who of course did the music for the film, more like all of maybe two. Anyway, so he did the music for the film, or rather, the lack thereof, as Eric Harrison said. Now, there is, of course, the famous exorcism theme, which I'm not going to attempt to whistle. But, you know, you hear it everywhere when you hear Halloween commercials and horror movie commercials all the time. You hear the Exorcist theme play all the time. But what I really noticed in the second time that I watched the film is, aside from the main exorcism theme near the beginning, as well as a little bit of music toward the end, this movie is extremely, extremely lacking for music. I'd say there's maybe about 8 to 10 minutes worth of music in the entire 2 hour and 5 minute runtime. And that really surprised me, but in a mostly good way. Though there were at times where the lack of music didn't really bug me, but it did it made me notice, and it did kind of bug me a little bit, but because I feel like there was some certain scenes that if they had just like some droning horror movie music, that it would have made the scenes have a bigger punch. But whatever. So the lack of music, for the most part, really doesn't bug me. But the small amount of music that we do here is pretty good. But the suspense in the film, this is where I say the lack of music definitely works, because there's a lot of moments throughout the movie where there's not really that much noise. And there's a couple scenes where Linda's mom is walking throughout the house, and she's just, all you hear is the ambient sounds of the house, and her breathing, her walking around, and you see quick flashes of a demon face. And it kind of gets under your skin, and it makes you feel like you're being watched. And the suspense that surrounds Regan, like, what's the next thing that this demon is going to do? What's the next thing that we're going to see Regan doing in her room? And when the shocking parts of the film do happen, the suspense pays off, and you certainly are shocked off your ass. So the suspense in this film certainly does work. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this leads me into pro number 5, is the scares. Whoa, does this movie have some great scares. The first true scare scene, I probably would say, is when the bed starts shaking on its own when when Regan is laying in it. That certainly freaks you out of your skin. When Regan first starts talking in the demon voice, when her eyes go white and she starts growling and her throat bulges out, that certainly gets under your skin. And to quote James Rolfe, that's some freaky deaky shit. Hands down, for me at least, the freakiest scene in the film is the infamous cross scene. I don't really feel comfortable describing this, so I'm just gonna try to be brief about it. Reagan's mom hears a kerfuffle going on in Reagan's room, and she enters, and she sees Reagan sitting on her bed with a metal crucifix in her hand, and we hear the demon voice saying, "Let Jesus fuck you." And she is stabbing herself with this crucifix. Then her head turns around 180 degrees and says, "Do you know what she did, your cunting daughter?" and then slaps the dog shit out of her mom, causing Reagan's mom to fall on her back and hurt herself, which the actress actually did hurt herself. William Friedkin had the actress tied up to a harness, a stunt harness, and which involved her being yanked on a rope, which would cause her to actually what's the word? It would maintain the illusion of her actually being knocked back. However, William Friedkin himself yanked on the rope way too hard. She ended up being obviously yanked too hard. She landed on the corner of a dresser and I believe either bruised or broke a couple bones in either her tailbone or suffered some kind of injury to her back. So when you see her land on that dresser in the film, that is her actual cry of pain that she suffered on set, but they kept that in the film anyway. Jesus, you're an asshole, William Friedkin. So yeah, the scares in this movie are certainly effective. They get under your skin, and specifically the cross scene. The first time I saw that, this was my expression on my face. So I'm not going to say that this movie, well, no, this movie did not make me afraid to go to bed, but yeah, I certainly did not see that coming. So yeah, that happened. Pro number 6 that I have about this movie is Damian Karras, of course, played by Jason Miller. First off, is it a little strange that this character's name is Damien and the main character of The Omen is also named Damien? And they both have to do with demons and anti-Christianity stuff. And also Jason Miller looks like prototype Rocky in this film. Jason Miller does a very, very good job as Damian Karras. And one thing that I noticed when I saw Eric Harrison's review for this film, I didn't really notice, but I discovered about Damian Karras, and I especially noticed it on the second reviewing, is Damian Karras is a Catholic priest who is actually struggling with his faith. He's struggling with his faith, and he's struggling to maintain his belief. Maybe not necessarily his belief in God, but he's struggling to maintain his belief in Catholicism itself. You could pretty much surmise that this is due to the death of his mom, which is understandable. It's very obvious that he was very, very, very close to his mom. And when she passes away in the first third of the film, for a good majority of the rest of the movie, he's very jaded. He's very cold towards others. It's understandable because he's clearly in mourning, which is honestly how I would be. So I think it's a really interesting angle to go with having one of the main characters be a religious person who's actually struggling with his faith. I think that's a really fascinating idea, and I think for movies like this who take themselves as seriously as they do, they should take note with religious people who are either struggling with their faith or they lose their faith. They do something similar to that with Father Marin in Dominion and Exorcist at the beginning, so maybe I'll be surprised by those movies as well. Oh, it is raining outside. So yeah, I like Damian Karras. I will admit, though, that at very few times throughout the movie, really cinematic trash, that's a lot of fish. That got old the third day. Boy. Moving on. So anyway, Jason Miller's acting, I do feel in a couple moments, very, very few, does come off as being a little wooden, though you could say that he's just really into his character in the fact that he is so jaded after the loss of his mom. So I'm not really sure if that's a problem, New Nick Jack compilation coming soon. Do a boy compilation. That would be amusing. Or a burp compilation. That would be super amusing. Anyway. See, I like Father Karras. He's a good character. Pro number 7 is the actual exorcism scene. Of all the possession and exorcism movies that I've seen a couple. None have even come close to the actual exorcism scene. Really, Kaiju Network? None have come close to even scratching the surface of the Exorcist scene in the original Exorcist, which is understandable because this movie does it the most realistically. It's a tad over the top at times, but I think that adds to the overall shock value and the overall scare value of the exorcism scene itself. I also feel like it's one of the most authentic, which certainly is a good thing. It goes to show that the creators of the movie really wanted to make this feel as real as possible. So kudos to them for that. The exorcism scene, it's very intense. It's very gritty. It's very gripping. It leaves you on the edge of your seat. And when it's over, you feel emotionally drained. Very much so emotionally drained. Because you feel like you went through this exorcism scene yourself. Or like you yourself were conducting this exorcism. As psychologically draining, emotionally draining, and physically draining. You feel as drained as the actual characters do in the film. So the exorcism scene in this movie is awesome. The only thing that doesn't really ruin it, but I can't deny it gets a little annoying, is the amount of times that they say the power of Christ compels you. If you were to play a drinking game of the amount of times that they say the power of Christ compels you, after 2 minutes, you would be completely shit-faced and you'd have to have your stomach pumped. I don't recommend a drinking game and your foot's on screen. Still on screen.
How?
Very carefully.
What the fuck?
Anyway, oh my god, it is raining cats and dogs. Anyway, so yeah. And the last pro that I have for the original Exorcist, that's a lot of Christ compelling. Really, Kaiju Network? No! Don't egg them on! Anyway, the last pro that I have is the special effects in this film are pretty damn spectacular. Even though they're extremely minimalist, that's perfectly fine. A lot of the effects in this film I feel like were done very simply. Like the door shutting by itself, you can easily do that with not piano wire, but like fishing string and just hide it. Things moving on their own, you can do that pretty easily, but it definitely does work. The makeup effects for Regan when she's in full-on demon possession mode are absolutely fantastic. Her skin looks like it's frostbitten. She has a busted lip, a split nostril, bruising and scratches all over her face and her arms. When we see the scratches of "Help Me" on her stomach, we see her ribs and her collarbone and her breastbone, and she looks like she's emaciated. We also see her veins and her skin's kind of a bluish tinge, and it's effectively disturbing, and it definitely does look real. And of course, there's the famous image of Regan turning her head around 180 degrees. It was a puppet. Let's be honest, it was a puppet, but it's still effective, and it looks almost real, and it certainly is freaky. The Joker-esque grin that the thing has kind of gives it away that it's a puppet. But outside of that, the effects in this film, again, they're kind of minimalist, but overall they are absolutely fantastic and still hold up to this day. The greatest effect of all is actually on Max von Sydow. Max von Sydow at the time was only 44 years old, but they put makeup and prosthetics on his skin to make him look like he was 70 or 84 years old. Don't exactly know why they did this, though Eric Harrison theorized that maybe it was because this character was going to be knocked around and thrown around all over a room. They didn't want to actually hire an old man to play this part because they didn't want to potentially hurt him bad. And it's a theory, but I actually do kind of agree with that. It may have just been, well, they wanted Max von Sydow, but they really wanted Max von Sydow, but they just decided, oh, fuck it, we'll just make him old. Whatever. It still works. And the makeup does look very effective. I didn't know that Max von Sydow was only 44 until I saw Eric Harrison's review for the film. Yeah, if the Exorcist demon had a massive underbite. So with all these great things to say about the original Exorcist, do I have any cons with the film? I do. I have 3. The first one is that this movie is not very rewatchable. You can watch this movie maybe once a year. You may say that's nitpicking, maybe, but I like my horror movies to be rewatchable. I like my movies to be fun. This movie isn't exactly fun, and in my opinion, this movie is really not rewatchable. So, again, it's not a huge problem, but it is a problem for me nonetheless. The last 2 cons kind of tie in together, but I'm going to talk about the lesser of 2 evils. Aside from Linda Blair, Max von Sydow, Max von Sydow's, he's not amazing or anything because he's barely in the film, but he is decent in the role. And Jason Miller, I find the rest of the cast to be kind of wooden, kind of annoying, and kind of lifeless. Not much to say about that. Their acting, I guess, is just kind of okay, but it's passable. But the rest of the cast, I just find them to be very boring and very hollow. But my biggest problem with this film actually is Reagan's mom. I find her acting to be actually not somewhat, I find her acting to be annoyingly over the top at times. Specifically the scene when she's trying to convince Father Karras to perform an exorcism on Reagan. She goes, you go into that room and you could tell me that my daughter will be saved by an exorcism. You tell me that. Now you could say that she's just acting like a normal mom would. She's concerned for her daughter's sake, and she's desperate to make her daughter better, which is somewhat true, but for me that only goes so far. So, well, at moments I will say that, see what's her name? I will say that Ellen Burstyn does do a good job as Chris McNeil. I still find her character to be somewhat annoying at times, and I do find her acting to be a little too over the top at times for my tastes. But aside from that, that's all I have to say about the original Exorcist. It is a good movie. It's a very, very, very good movie. Hands down, not my favorite horror movie of the 1970s. That's the original Alien. But I probably will say that it is the best horror movie of the 1970s, with the Alien being the first Alien movie being a very, very close second. It's not one of my favorite horror films. It's not very rewatchable. I might put it on a runner-up list of my favorites, but I see myself watching this movie on extreme special occasions. But of course, if you're a hardcore horror movie fan, I do recommend it. And especially if you're into ghosts and demons and possessions, I do recommend you watch The Exorcist. My rating for this movie will be on 2 scales, objectively and personally. Do you watch this more or less than G54? I watch this less than G54. I can watch the original Gojira a few times a year, actually. I can barely watch this every 2 years. So personally, I am going to give this movie a 7.5 out of 10. I do enjoy it. I do think it's a good film. Hang on. But personally, I like a lot of horror movies a lot more. I'm just going to ignore that. But still, I do recommend it, and I do like this movie. And I certainly am glad that I own it. Personally, I'm going to give this a 9 out of 10. I wanted to give it a perfect 10, but really, aside from really it's the hollow cast that make this or that keep this from being a perfect 10 out of 10. I wanted to give it a perfect 10 out of 10, but because the rest of the cast outside of Max von Sydow, Jason Miller, and Linda Blair being so hollow and boring, I cannot in good conscience give this a perfect 10, which is why I'll be giving this a 9 out of 10. It's a very good movie. Overall, it's very well made, and it is one of the most important horror movies of all time. And I'm still not sure if I consider it to be one of the best. So, post your comments down below and let me know what you think. Hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. Share this video with your friends. And look forward to the next Tremors video, which will be coming out most likely tomorrow. And my fucking hair. It's just a total mess. And it's because of this hair that Kaiju Network is giving this review a 9 out of 10. Thanks, Kaiju Network, you little turd. And as always, go out and if you're going to perform an exorcism, bring 5 people. Come on now. And I will see you guys in the next video.